a quote of Thomas Edison's. Edison said, "Discontent is the first necessity of progress." And my role today, if you will, is to help raise your level of discontent. Cybercrime is, as you said, I mean, it's a new subject, new kid on the block, if you will. And my objective, very much like what, Paul, you were talking about, is help you understand both the need and what the solution to that need looks like. By way of introduction, Citadel Information Group, we started our firm back in 2002. Kimberly Pease and myself were the founders. I come out of, first a mathematics career early on, and then was in the aerospace industry in the 1980s. I actually did some work at the White House and nuclear missile stuff and those kinds of things. My other two partners, Kimberly and David Lamb, they're more on the IT management side of things. So we bring that kind of balance between, how do you make sure nuclear missiles, don't go off by accident, and how do you keep a network up and running, and putting those pieces together. That's kind of what our firm is all about. We have a cast of thousands that we work with as well, depending on what the specific needs are. And we offer a complete range of information security consulting services, as you can see on this chart. But what I'm most proud of is that with the leadership we provide in the community. But enough about us. This is really about, I think, these three questions. How serious is cybercrime, and why do you care? All right? How vulnerable are you really, and what do you have to do about it? So to get started, I mean, here's the poster child of the week, Target, right? But Target demonstrates something that's very, very, it's different. First of all, the sophistication of this cyber attack should put the lie to any attitude that, oh, these are just, people in Nigeria sending emails that you've won $27 million. All you have to do is respond. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, Michael Corleone and The Godfather would put together, all right? And we were talking about that earlier. It's also, and we'll come back to this point later, when you look at how did the bad guys get into Target, they got in through a vendor with computer access to Target's network was hacked. The vendor happens to be in Pennsylvania. They were hacked, and through that hack, they got into Target, because this is a risk vector that is not well understood. So we'll come back to that point later. How bad is what we're seeing with Target? Well, this is the number of financial records that have been reported as breached since California became the first in the nation state to require breach disclosures. That's 662 million. Add 70 million to that, because these numbers go through the end of December, and it wasn't until January of this year that Target realized that it wasn't 40 million credit cards they lost, but it was information of 110 million people that they lost. And as consumers, I mean, this is like problematic. You think about this, oh my God, what are we going to do? And if you want to go to our website, in fact, we have a resource section. You can download a consumer's guide to staying safe online that has a lot of tips in it on this. But the real issue from our perspective here in this room today is the business implications of this. When you look at studies over what does a breach disclosure cost a company to recover from, you're talking about approximately $200 per compromised record. It's not going to be that much in Target's case. 110 million times $200 is a big number, but this is the average. And certainly for smaller businesses, this number is a reasonable number. And that covers things like, there's investigative costs, and breach disclosure costs, there's legal fees, identity theft monitoring, and a whole host of lawsuits that we've already begun to see in the case of Target. That's just a piece of the story, though. There is right now an escrow company that is in receivership, 12 people out of work. Why? Because their computers were attacked by cyber criminals in China, in fact. That's where this breach came from. Those cyber criminals got onto the computers that are used for online banking in the escrow company. Escrow companies have lots of money in trust funds. The cyber criminals have discovered that. So the bad guys from northern China got on the computers of the escrow company, installed what's called a keylogger, kept track of all the keystrokes that the users were inputting, including their user ID and password to their online bank, and the answers to all of the secret questions, like mother's maiden name and that sort of stuff. The cyber criminals then went online to the bank, right through the company's computer. So from the bank's perspective, these look like the computers they were used to talking to. And the bank transferred over $1 million to northern China. Escrow company found out about it, notified the bank. Bank says, well, it was your user ID and password, so we're not responsible. And this is one of the things that too few businesses understand, that if you're a commercial account holder and you're the victim of online fraud, your bank is not responsible for that. What that means in this case, in the case of this particular escrow company, they're now in receivership. 12 people are out of work. That's the kind of impact. And according to the Bloomberg study, there's $1 billion a year we're talking about in online bank fraud. And here's a few of the companies. Efficient Services Escrow Group is the one I'm talking about. You can read about it in Brian Krebs' blog, Krebs on security.com. And all the others. There are other organizations that have been victims of online bank fraud that we know about. Too many of these victims we don't know about because they and the bank kind of work it out, whatever, and nobody wants the publicity for it. But think about $1 billion. That's 50,000 jobs. So we're talking serious impact to the economy. The estimate is that 750 of the Fortune 1000 have been breached and their trade secrets, intellectual property, have been stolen allegedly by the Chinese. The building there, that's a building in Shanghai where, according to the Mandiant company, who did work after the New York Times breach, that's where these attacks are coming from inside of China. They're stealing our intellectual property. They're putting us at a significant economic disadvantage as a result of that. There's a new thing, it's an old thing packaged in new bottles called ransomware. We've seen this. We got called by a company. They got hit by this ransomware. Basically what happens, somebody gets an email, there's a link or an attachment in the email, whatever it is, and they click on that link or attachment. That runs a program on their computer, a standard Windows program called the encryption program, and all of their documents get encrypted. And if the computer's on a network, all the documents on all the computers on that network that the attack can see get encrypted. And you get a little notice, much like one of those, that depending on the nature of who's doing it, ultimately says, we have your files, we've encrypted them. If you want your files back, you have to pay us. And the one time that we most recently saw this, we got called by a company, of course, after the attack. It was 2 Bitcoins, $2,500 at the time in the value of Bitcoins. That's what it cost this company to recover from the ransomware attack. How bad is this really? Here's some statistics from the House of Representatives, one of their subcommittees that looked at that. 75% of small and medium-sized businesses believe that they are well protected from cyber attack. 75% believe that. 20 to 30% of all attacks hit these small businesses. And here's the killer. 60% of these small businesses are out of business within 6 months. Small businesses don't have the recovery ability of a Target. Okay, this is going to cost Target a ton of money, what happened to them, but they're going to survive. Small businesses don't have that luxury of capital, of excess capital, of being able to go into the capital markets and raise money for losses like this. So just keep this in mind as we go forward. 60% of small businesses close within 6 months of being victimized by cybercrime. As I said, part of my job is to raise the level of discontent, right? Yeah. The reality, I mean, we're talking an existential risk to the business, this issue of cybercrime. And so much so that it's almost 10 years ago now that the Business Roundtable already said information security requires CEO attention. And that's part of my message. This is not an IT challenge. I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes as we go further. This is a business risk issue. But before we get there, let's look at why we are so vulnerable. What's going on here, right? And I've got 3 inconvenient truths. I'll show them in a couple of stories. One, the internet was not designed to be secure. It was designed to allow disparate networks of computers to talk to each other. That goes back to the 1970s when that was done. Computer technology is inherently flawed. Okay, that's how I got started in this. Or the PhD is in mathematics, and I kind of moved from the mathematical world into the computer science world 30 years ago. On that specific subject, how do we write computer programs so they are better? And it's a challenge. We've not met that challenge. And it's in part, it's the same challenge we humans face. I mean, we are all imperfect. We know that. We make mistakes. We get sloppy. We get lazy. And oftentimes we just don't know any better. That's part of what it is to be human, particularly at a time like this when the world is changing on us so quickly. So real quickly, first, this in some sense, this was one chart illustrates the challenge we face. What we need is a bank vault to protect our information, like what you see over on the left on that picture. The picture on the right is the entrance to the swimming pool at the Four Seasons Hotel down in Southern California, down in where is it? North of San Diego, whatever that is. Anyway, my wife and I are there a few years ago, and we have a room up on the second floor up above the swimming pool. And I'm watching people go in the morning. I'm outside drinking my coffee, and they put their room key in there and turn the handle, and they go in. Just like you go to an internet website, and you put in your user ID and your password, and you go in. Then I see a little girl, 9, 10 years old, thin, walk up to the bar, up to the gate. She sticks her hand between the bars, reaches up, and opens up the door from inside. This is the kind of security that we have versus the kind of security we need. Example. Cyber criminals a few months ago hacked NBC's website. Think about it. I mean, NBC's a big company. They hacked their website. They put software on that website so that when you went to the website or I went to the website as a visitor, that software that the cyber criminals put on their website runs inside of our browsers. And depending on how protected your computer is, you could get your computer taken over by the bad guys simply by visiting a website. Next one happened more recently. I don't know if you're familiar, how ads get served up on the internet. You go to a website and you see ads. There are obviously the ad agencies who produce the ads. They then work with an advertising server whose job it is to put the ads on the website. Well, this one ad server, very much like in the Target case of Vendor, got hacked. And every ad they were serving up on Yahoo was infected with malicious software, which when you went to the site, if you clicked on the ad, you could now get that malware on your computer, and it would take over your computer and subject you to online bank fraud and all the other bad things that can happen. What happens is these bad guys exploit the software flaws on our computers to install their malicious software. And all software is flawed. That's one of these inconvenient truths. We don't know how to write complex software that does not have flaws in it. So whether it's Microsoft itself, it's Java, which is the cyber criminal's favorite friend. Java is something that runs in your browser, known to be very, very, very buggy. Cyber criminals love it because they exploit it to take advantage of these things. And we users ourselves, it goes to the human piece of this, we unwittingly open up the door to cyber criminals. This is an email that I got a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago. It looks exactly like it came from Citibank. You look at this email, you will think it came from Citibank. The two tip-offs, one, it asks for information that no bank is going to ask you to do. Banks don't do this sort of thing. And second, if you hover your mouse over the URL there, this is what you get. It's not www.citibank.com/ and then whatever else. It's actually, this is the website that if you click on that link, you get directed to. Very much like the NBC hack. Cybercriminals hack this website, happens to be a religious website down in South America. Back on some deep page, they build a page, and here's how you get to that page. They installed malware. You go to that website, you download that malicious software, that malware, onto your computer, and now your computer is owned by the bad guys. So we do this. And in fact, users are the weakest link. We're weak in two ways. One, inadvertently, just the way like that email shows. We open up the door to cyber criminals. But then also, there are a few of us inside companies who are malicious. And ultimately, managing the users turns out to be one of the biggest challenges in cybercrime itself. So you think to yourself, well, wait a minute. I'm running antivirus software. Aren't I cool? Aren't I protected? I got a firewall, I got antivirus software, isn't that enough? And what this chart shows, and it's a bit busy, but it makes a point. It was done by the University of Alabama in Birmingham a couple of years ago. It looked at spam, what's the email sending, spam every day, what's the dominant spamming attack on that day. At the time, there were 42 antivirus engines. Well, if you look at this column, it shows you how many of those antivirus programs caught that particular piece of spam. And you see abysmal numbers. 3 out of 42, 4 out of 42, there's 5 out of 42, there's some 0 out of 42s there. Most of the attacks get through the antivirus software, and there's no, it's not a surprise. If you're the cyber criminal and you build this attack and you're all ready to launch it, before you actually send it out into the wild, you run it against what are now the 50 antivirus engines, and you know before you even send it out that it's not going to be identified by your antivirus programs. They test it before they send it. So they get right past the antivirus stuff. So what do we got to do about it, okay? And I think we start with this great quote of Benjamin Franklin's, distrust and caution. Distrust and caution are the parents of security. So we've got to raise put on those distrust and caution antennae so we kind of get it that way. And what that means is, first of all, there's 3 elements to cybersecurity. We're a piece of it. We do the information security management piece. That's what we are. Roll up our sleeves, we go in and we manage security for our clients and with our clients. But there's 2 other aspects to this as well. There's cyber insurance. Obviously, Gallagher is the place to talk to them about the insurance needs. And cyber law as well. There's attorney issues that have to be reflected here. So with that, looking at just the information security piece, every organization I know manages its finances in a very rigorous, disciplined, formal way. There's rules and procedures and regular audits and all of those kinds of things for the management of the money in an organization. You have to manage the security of your information the same way. That means a couple of things. You've got to implement what is in the biz called an information security management system, but that means put somebody in charge. Oftentimes we'll walk into companies, do an assessment, and nobody's in charge. It's scattered, that responsibility. You've got to have policies and standards, and they've got to be formal and disciplined and documented and risk-based and all of those kinds of things. You got to know where your sensitive information is, whether it's in servers in your offices, or it's scattered out in the cloud, or it's on desktops of users, or some users have it on their laptops, and maybe it's on your smartphone there or your tablets. You can't recover it, for example, going back to the agility piece. All the servers in the world aren't going to do you any good if you don't know where your information is and you can't get it back. So that becomes a third piece of it. You've got to train and educate staff. Too many people that work in our businesses don't yet have this level of education and training. And you've got to manage IT from an information security perspective, which coincidentally just also happens to improve the quality of delivery of IT itself, if you're doing that. So these are the 5 things you have to do. And I want to give you a case study now just to demonstrate kind of from our, kind of how we see this working. This was a 90-day project. Always starts with an assessment, the Chinese proverb, if you don't know where you are, a map won't help you. So you got to know where you are first. Or that's it. And we look at this, we break it into three pieces. What are the organizational weaknesses? Who's in charge? Is there training? Yada, yada, yada. What about technology management? Are those things being done well? And what about the IT network itself? What does that look like? So out of the assessment, you get to some basic planning. And in this case, the things we saw that were most significant, no one was in charge, there are no policies or standards, information was dispersed, there was no user awareness, online banking wasn't being managed, and as you can see, there's a lot of other weaknesses as well. And so we put together a program, a plan, and then began working the plan, always looking for that combination of two things. Where's the risk the greatest, and where's the low-hanging fruit that we can attack the easiest? Those are the two things you always want to pay attention to when you're putting this plan together. So in our case, first thing was, we better get some leadership in here. So we worked with senior management, the CFO, IT reported into the CFO, which is very, very common. CFO became the nominal head of, formally in charge of information security, and we kind of became his consigliere. Where our role is to augment him, to do the heavy lifting, while he's got the management authority. And we trained the entire the entire senior management team as well, so they knew what was going on here and what the responsibilities were. We took immediately very specific action to guard against online bank fraud. It's not hard. First of all, get a separate computer. A few $100s, doesn't cost a lot of money. Use that computer only for online banking. Don't use it for surfing the web, don't use it for email. You're much less likely to get hit. So that was one thing we did on the banking side. The other thing we did, was we worked with the bank. Banks are happy to do this. I run a group of bankers and law enforcement people that meet once a month around bank fraud issues in the cyber age. And they don't want these losses any more than the customers do. But it takes collaboration. It takes working together to make those pieces fit. So we worked with the banks to set up what's called dual control. It takes two people to authorize an online transaction. Out-of-band confirmation before the transaction is released. A phone call is made to somebody very specifically who a couple of people get that authorization, and they have to authorize the email, the transaction. I'm pushing the wrong button. We set up transfer limits and they don't do any overseas wiring, so we said to the bank, don't allow any. If you see any overseas wires come across, you call us right away because they're fraudulent. So we knew that. And then, we kind of did the obvious, what the plan showed that we needed to do. We installed policies and standards. And this is not your HR handbook. Your HR handbook talks about acceptable use and email and no rights to privacy and things like that. We're talking about things like, disaster recovery, just to your point. On our side of it, it's will the information be ready and available in the case of the disaster? Because otherwise you bring agility in and they've got no information to work with. Okay. Are there standards for security and passwords and access control and so on and so on? We put policies and standards in place. We provided training to users. Help them understand that on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. It's so easy to be somebody who you're not. You get an email, you think it says it's from your friend Bob. Is it really from Bob? Not necessarily. Yet people have to be cautious. They have to be distrustful. Ben Franklin's comment comes to play. So we trained people for this, and we began an education program as well. If some of you are healthcare, you have HIPAA requirements. You're required regulations that you have an education plan for your employees. So we installed that. The idea is Sun Tzu, the art of war. If you don't know your enemies nor yourself, you will be imperiled in every single battle. It's the reality. One of the things our firm does is we publish a cybersecurity news of the week. As part of our cybersecurity newsletter. It goes out to about 20,000 people every week. And our clients use it as part of their education program because they send it off to all of their employees, all of their staff. And it's the cyber stories of the week. A lot of stories lately about either Target, Neiman Marcus on the one side, and then the whole NSA Snowden set of issues, cyber privacy versus national security. But We cover stories like that. We cover cyber defense. We cover cybersecurity management stories and so on. We typically have 15 to 25 stories a week. And that goes out to all of our clients' staff. So we did that. We began the information inventory. This is a tough thing often to get your arms around, particularly in even medium-sized companies, because information's so scattered. But what's the information that needs to be collected? You know, credit cards, employee health information, and so on, yada, yada, yada. And then where is it? How do you get your arms around it? Those things. So we began that. We worked with the vendor. Again, this goes back to the Target thing. Target was broken into because their heating, ventilation, air conditioning contractor, one of them in Pennsylvania, was broken into, hacked into, and that hack led to Target. Well, every business we know, every organization, every nonprofit uses IT vendors if they're small. They won't have that all in-house. They'll have IT vendors. They become a natural place. Let's hack the IT vendor, and through the IT vendor, get into the company. So we worked with the IT vendor. We looked at service level agreements, made sure that things that needed to be done were being done. We looked at the vendor's own access control, and we looked at their own internal security management, so as to make sure that they were not likely to be a conduit for a cyber breach. As a piece of that, as I mentioned, all software is vulnerable. It's just one of the realities we have to live with. Part of what that means for the IT folks is they've got to be very aggressive at keeping computers updated and patched. Yesterday was Patch Tuesday, every second Tuesday of the month. Microsoft releases a whole set of updates for the month, and they need to be, those patches need to be put on desktops and workstations and so on. And so we implemented that patch and management program. That's something all of you as well. You have home computers, most of you. Right? Those computers aren't being managed by your IT people. You've got to keep those patched. Those are weaknesses, particularly if from those home computers you access the corporate network. If your home computers aren't patched, you put the corporate network at risk. So we publish, along with our Cybersecurity News of the Week, we publish our Weekend Patch and Vulnerability Report. This is the one from actually just about a year ago now. It's time to change that, change the graphic. But every week, this goes out to those same 20,000 people. And absolutely encourage you at home. You know, sign up for this. It's free. You can sign up on our website. Give me a card. I can get you signed up, whichever it is. It's a great thing to do if you have teenage children. This can become one of their chores. They understand this stuff anyway, you know, better than some of us do. That their responsibility is to go around to all the computers in the house every Sunday and patch the computers. Make sure that the vulnerabilities that the cyber criminals look to exploit, make sure that those vulnerabilities aren't on your computers. So we did that. We discovered that remote access was not controlled. We installed what's called a VPN, a virtual private network, so that communication back and forth between remote users and the corporate network was being better protected. We encrypted all the laptops. This is one of those no-brainers that often doesn't get done. It's there is no challenge in some sense. I mean, you just say, we're going to encrypt all of our laptops. How expensive is it? It's free. You know, there's built-in laptop encryption from either Microsoft or Macintosh, Windows, you know, Apple or Microsoft, depending on who you use, what kind of computers you have. And then there's third parties as well that will encrypt hard drives. And the nice part about it, if you lose a laptop that's not encrypted, and let's say it's got healthcare information on it, or other kinds of personally identifiable information, you have a breach disclosure. That breach disclosure is, we said, $200 a record on average. That can lead to fines. Particularly now in the healthcare side, we're seeing more and more evidence of audits from Health and Human Services on even smaller healthcare organizations. If you encrypt the laptop and it's lost, okay, you move on. There's no breach disclosure requirement. If the encryption's done right, that machine becomes worthless to the cyber criminal who gets it. Think about that. The VAs a few years ago lost 27.5 million IDs of veterans because a laptop had that information unencrypted and it was stolen. and the VA got a lot of egg on their face and breach disclosure and all of those kinds of things. All that goes away had those laptops been encrypted. And once you start getting IT under better security management control, it becomes a slam dunk to do this. Because a piece of that is IT's got to know from a security perspective, what are all the devices we've got on our network and where are they? And once you know where all of them are, you can now call them in to have them encrypted. When you put the VPN on the laptop, you can encrypt the laptop at the same time. So this becomes another one of those things that we did. Okay? If you don't know what it is, where it is, you can't secure it. So we needed to get an inventory. All of us tend to have these devices, BYOD, bring your own device. And while they're good from a lot of perspectives, they make it easier on IT management often. We humans are becoming very, we do this, we live with these devices. Sometimes it's for personal use, sometimes it's for business use, but we use them, we live with them. So it's important to get them from a business perspective under control, and we did that. We began to get that inventory built. And this goes back to the disaster recovery again. One of the things we found in the assessment was that backups had never really been tested. What was tested was, we need to recover a file. Can you go get it? And they'd go get the backup. IT would get the backup tapes, run them, get the file off. But that's a far cry different from the disaster when now you've got to restore all of the files off of the backup tape onto a server. You better know how that server's configured, so it's not enough that you've got the information, the backup tapes. You've also got to get the knowledge of how to set up the server to receive that information, and then you've got to test it to make sure it's all working. So we did that because we didn't want a disaster to happen, and let's say they were using Agility and they called you and you parachuted in like you do and got all these great equipment for them, but we couldn't get the data back, the information back. So we tested that. Okay? And then the same thing, bad stuff is going to happen. Target's a good example of that as well. I mean, Target did what they thought was reasonable and appropriate to protect their information. It clearly wasn't enough. You need a formal incident response program in place so that when malware is found on a computer, you know what to do about it. The last thing you want is for your IT people to simply take the computer and remove the malicious software from it. Why? A couple of reasons. First of all, it may not really remove all of the malicious software on it. This malware stuff is really bad, and just because you removed it using yesterday's recommendations, this is today's malware. It's changed from yesterday. Removing what's required to remove it may also change. The second reason why you simply don't want to remove it and go back to work is because it's quite possible that, in fact, you've had a breach, that you may have to investigate whether a breach disclosure is required, and if IT gets on the machine and start playing with it, all that computer forensics information can be destroyed. And we've seen instances where companies have had to go through the expense and the trouble of a breach disclosure because the information that might have prevented that had been deleted, had been erased by IT people unnecessarily going in and wiping the computer. So all of that evidence that would have saved the company a lot of money is now gone. You need a plan for this, and in fact, we put one. And again, one of the things we've had the ability to do, because we play in the small and medium-sized business market the way we do, is we've done these enough that we don't have to go in and reinvent the wheel every time now for a new client. This is kind of a standard flow chart of how we do incident recovery, incident response. And all we need to do when we go into a new client in many ways is use the same model. We just have to change the names. Who do you call? Who's on the team? Who's the IT vendor? That kind of information. Who might you need to notify in the event of a breach? That has to change. But the general flow chart doesn't have to change at all. Next thing we did is we introduced staff to the LA chapter of the Information Systems Security Association. I've been president of that chapter for 5 years now. ISSA is the oldest information security professional association in the world. We have well over 10,000 members, 75 countries. Our former international president was Barack Obama's first cybersecurity coordinator, Howard Schmidt. We do a lot of things for the community. Our whole vision is reflected in this tagline that it takes the village to secure the village. It's part of the reason I'm so happy to have the opportunity to speak here, because you're all part of the village. You're all part of this. So among the things we have for your IT people and your security people, the more technical people, we have a monthly meeting. Most of them are lunch meetings, third Wednesday of every month. We have as well for CFOs and the people who manage the IT network. We have a bi-monthly, every other month working group that gets together. Typically 10 to 15 CFOs come to that. Let me know. I'll be happy to invite your CFO, invite you as well to that. Next meeting is in March 21st. And then we have our annual Information Security Summit. That's on May 16th this year. Our keynote speaker is Richard Clark, who you may know from ABC News. Richard was in the White House, the Clinton White House, and the Bush White House before he left government, and he's now a commentator for ABC News. His second book will be coming out that same week of May 16th, and I invite you all to join us at the summit. But again, this is one of those things, join the village. This is a changing field. Every day, new stuff is going on. And whether you're at the IT, information security, the technical level, or whether you're at the management level, there's stuff here that you need to kind of stay on top of. And I'm really proud of ISSA that we are the voice of information security here in the Los Angeles community. And then that was all good. That was 90 days, but where do you go from here? Information security is a moving target, right? There's stuff that we surfaced in our assessment that we weren't able to get to. We got it started, like the information inventory, like the bring your own device inventory, things like that, but we certainly couldn't finish. Well, the whole idea of an information security management system is very, very much like the idea of continuous improvement in any field, whether it's continuous quality improvement, whether it's business process engineering and the continuous improvement that flows out of that. Just one of the realities of business is in today's hyper-competitive, value-driven world, if you will, we're always under the gun to do better, 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 and to do it more and more and more and more efficiently. And that's the idea of continuous improvement. And so what we did to finish the first 90 days was there's always these 4 steps. You assess where you are, you decide what you're going to do about it, you plan it out, failure to plan is planning to fail, and then you implement it, and then you go back again and you assess, how did we do? Did we get done what we thought we were going to get done? Did we get done more? Why? What happened? What were the good things? What were the bad things? And how's the world changed on us as well? And you just keep doing this over and over and over and over again, and you get, kind of out of the other end of the machine, continuous improvement. So we built that phase 2, next phase plan for them. Where's it all lead? To what we call information peace of mind. That's what you're looking for here. Can we prevent malicious software from taking over your computers? No, we can't. There's no silver bullets to this. What you can do, and what we work with our clients to do, or what you can do, however, but you need to do it, is get your information security to be proactively managed, and not by IT. It's an element of risk. So proactively manage it at that same level that you manage the risk in your organizations. There's a standard of care that you're all subject to. If you're healthcare, it's HIPAA. If you're just an organization in California of any kind, you've got California laws and regulations that apply to you. There's a standard of care that you have to meet. If you collect credit cards, you've got the payment card industry data security standard you have to meet. So you want to meet that standard of care. And I contend that if you do this, if you really proactively manage your security, you will, over the long run on a probability basis, actually save money. Because the cost of a breach, the cost of a loss can be so catastrophic, can be existential, particularly if you're in that small and medium-sized business market, that may have a low probability event of happening, but the impact of its happening is so outrageously costly, like your whole business, that you are far better spending the few dollars, because most of the stuff I've talked about isn't expensive. Most of the stuff I've talked about is more attitude. It's more saying, yes, we're going to do it, than it is putting money, throwing money on it. It's mostly that attitude. So hopefully I've raised your level of discontent somewhat. As you mentioned, there's need and there's solution. I hope I've also been able to help you kind of see where that solution lives in that idea of proactively manage information security. Certainly I can take some questions, and here's some more information if you want to, either my contact information, Citadel, and sign up, as I say, for our free Cybersecurity News of the Week and Cybersecurity Weekend Vulnerability and Patch Report. Those come out every Sunday. They get emailed at 3 in the afternoon. Automatically, my business partner Kimberly and I blog them every Sunday morning between 9:30 and 11, and then the email goes out at 3. Join us at the ISSA-LA